Hi, my name's Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about Metamorphoses by Ovid. And I'd like to go through this ancient text, exploring some of its themes and really discussing what this book is about. Now, Ovid, of course, was one of the great Roman poets, and he wrote this probably between AD 2 and AD 8. And around about AD 8, he was exiled to Tomis by the Black Sea. We don't know why he was exiled. Perhaps he upset Caesar Augustus, who was the emperor at the time, but he died in exile. But this Metamorphoses has become his most well-known and most beloved work, an inspiration to countless other artists and authors and musicians stretching up to the 20th and 21st century. So it's a very important text. What is it? Well, basically it's a collection of Greek myths. Ovid, of course, was Roman, but he'd inherited this vast wealth of Greek stories, Greek legends, Greek myths, and he's decided to put them into an anthology. But each myth is connected by the idea of transformation. So in each of the myths, a character changes, quite often into a bird or an animal or a plant or a flower. But sometimes the transformation can be slightly different. For instance, some of the characters are transformed into gods, some mortals are transformed into gods, and Ovid sometimes includes myths which talk about the transformation of the world. So you have perhaps, famously it begins with the creation of the cosmos and the earth going through different ages. Ovid divides these myths into 15 books, and they are a bewildering array of classic stories. It's such a great joy reading this book because you get a brush up of all those myths which you feel that you should know, and you get to you're reminded of who the characters are and who they interact with, etc. So all the most famous ones are in this collection. We have, King Midas. Everything he touches turns to gold, of course. We have, the many stories involving Apollo, Pan and Syrinx. We have Orpheus, in his descent to the underworld. We have the stories around Troy as well, involving Ulysses and Achilles, Ajax. Jupiter, of course, the king of the gods, makes numerous appearances. And the stories are so, many of them are very beautiful and moving. Particularly some of the ones involving the nymphs, who are often pursued by male gods or humans or satyrs, crazed with lust. And you do feel sorry for these nymphs, but quite often those stories are very beautiful, the way they're transformed into trees and plants, etc. But there's a lot of real kind of earthy bloodlust in these stories as well. They wouldn't be out of place in an 18 action film, with, particularly in the more violent stories, limbs being torn off and intestines spilled, and you can sense Ovid's enjoyment in describing these, particularly in the battle between the Lapiths and the centaurs at the wedding. That really comes to the fore then. So there's a wide artistic spectrum, from the very elevated, rarefied tales down to the, you know, kind of crude blood and guts tales, and everything in between. Ovid has split this book. He split Metamorphoses into 15 books. We start with creation, going through the different ages of creation. We have the flood, of course, common in other myths as well. And we go through, you know, a vast array of brilliant stories, hundreds of them. And eventually, around about book 14 to 15, we start to think about Troy and Aeneas. And then we know that Aeneas is going to be on his way to Italy and found Rome. And right at the end of the book, we have the apotheosis of Julius Caesar. He's deified, he transforms into a god, with some of the other characters throughout Metamorphoses as well. And right at the end, Ovid has an epilogue, very brief, saying how everyone will read this book. And of course, people have for 2,000 years. Some of the themes that crop up, you know, other than the obvious theme of transformation, include a sense of lust. You know, there's a lot of sexual desire in these stories, which overspills to rape quite often as well, which, you know, for modern ears is very unsettling, particularly Jupiter coming down and raping various nymphs. So there's some aspects of these stories which are quite, you know, perhaps for modern sensibilities, quite difficult to take. Particularly, some of the more violent ones really are violent as well. There's the horrible story of, you know, Marsyas, who is flayed alive, and, you know, it doesn't pull any punches, some of these stories. But then you also have, there's a lot of love in these stories as well. You know, often unrequited, but sometimes joined together. There's a beautiful story of two older characters near the end, Philemon and Baucis, where they unwittingly offer hospitality to the gods, and they're rewarded for that. You know, that's a very beautiful story, actually. So there's a vast range in these stories. It's just such an amazing book. And, you know, if you're like me and has a passing interest in the arts, you know, including, say, for instance, you know, painting from the Renaissance period, then, you know, a book like this is indispensable because you get a real grip on these stories which have inspired so many artists in the ensuing 2,000 or so years. So if you haven't read Ovid's Metamorphoses, I recommend that you do. I don't think you'll regret it. And I've just included a brief slideshow with the structure of each of the 15 books, as well as the themes that crop up in this, this marvellous collection. Thanks for watching. Bye.